participant. All right, it looks like people are coming in. So if you're just getting on now, we're going to start the webinar here in just a couple minutes. As I see people get logged in and on and get this going. Give it about 30 more seconds, just let a few more people join, and we'll go ahead and get started with a little bit of housekeeping stuff. All right, well, I'll go ahead and just say a few things before we truly get started while people are still logging in, but thanks to everyone who's already here. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping details. We are recording this webinar and we'll make the recording available to everyone in a couple of days once it's finished processing. Also, since we're doing this ceremony in webinar format, you won't be able to see or hear anyone except for our panelists here in the webinar. But if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make throughout the ceremony, you can use the Q&A box that's down at the bottom of your screen. If anything pops up in your mind in the presentation, I'll monitor it throughout. And then if we have time, we can maybe do a couple questions at the end, but I'll keep an eye on that. So if you do have any questions or comments, do go ahead and put that in the Q&A box. Yes, all audience members, your cameras are automatically off and you're muted. So we cannot see or hear you and we won't be able to, but you can use that chat or Q&A function at the bottom if you'd like to say something or if you have a question or a comment throughout. For everybody who's just now joining us, we are recording this and we'll make it available soon. So it looks like we've had a chance to get everybody logged on. And like I said, if you do miss part of it, we'll get it recorded and we'll get it to you. So good evening. I'm so glad you all could join us tonight for this special event honoring Ann Miller Woodford for her work preserving and promoting the history of African American people in far western North Carolina. I'm Ann Chesky-Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Western North Carolina Historical Association. I hope you all are already familiar with us and the work that we do. But if not, I'm just going to take a few minutes before we get truly started to let you know a little bit more about our organization. WNCHA, as we're known, was founded in 1952 to preserve and promote the history of Western North Carolina through education, interpretation, collection, and collaboration. We're a nonprofit, we're a membership organization, and we hope that if you're not already a member of WNCHA, you'll consider joining us. I typically have a handful of membership forms to hand out to you right now, but since we're virtual, I'll just direct you to our website, which is WNCHistory.org, and you can find out more about our membership as well as about all of our mission and all of our other programs, programs like the one that we're doing tonight. We do offer several different programs every month, and although for the past year, most of our programs have been virtual and will continue to offer virtual programming, we are starting to transition back to some in-person programming, and we even have an in-person hike scheduled on Saturday to Hickory Nut Gap. So if you've certainly probably found our event schedule since you're here on our webinar tonight and you had to register through that system. But if not, please do check out what we've got coming up, and we're updating that schedule all the time with new events and programs. Also, for the next month and a half till July 3rd, we'll have Ann Miller Woodford's excellent exhibit, When All God's Children Get Together, which you'll hear lots more about tonight, on display here at our facility, which is the Smith McDowell House in Asheville. The house, it was built circa 1840. It's been our headquarters since the early 1980s, and we've also operated it as a historic house museum since then. So when you come to see Anne's exhibits, you can also tour our period rooms, and in those historic house rooms, we strive to tell a broad history of Western North Carolina through the stories of all the people who have walked the halls of our facility over the course of the last couple hundred years. And I will say I did turn off my ringer, but it's still ringing. But our longest running programs, which have been running since the 1950s, are our awards programs. Annually, we award the Thomas Wolfe Memorial Literary Award and the Outstanding Achievement Award. The Thomas Wolfe Award recognizes excellence in literature about Western North Carolina or by authors from the region. So often both of those things are true. But to tell you a little bit more about our Outstanding Achievement Award, which is what we're presenting tonight, I'm going to turn it over to the president of WNCHA's Board of Trustees, Ralph Simpson.
Thank you, Anne. And good evening to those of you who are watching, whether you're friends of Ann Miller Woodford, or friends of WNCHA, or fans of North Carolina history, Western North Carolina history. We're so glad you're watching. Before I really get into the heart of the program, I would like to build on a few things Ann said. We are so fortunate to have Ann Chesky-Smith as our executive director. She joined the association just 2 months before the COVID pandemic forced the closing of the Smith McDowell House. But the pandemic was not an obstacle to her work at all. She immediately began planning and implementing online activities and exhibits. With our board, we spent the past year doing strategic planning and some really serious soul searching. And today we're in a far better place than ever before. I also want to express gratitude to Trevor Freeman, our other staff member, who is doing excellent work in education and programming. Our Board of Trustees, there are 15 members. We are fully engaged in every way a nonprofit board should operate. And it's a pleasure to work with all of you. These are really exciting times. It's tempting to say that we are a reborn organization, but that would not do justice to the many people who have given their time, talent, and financial resources for the past 69 years. Yes, next year, the Western North Carolina Historical Association will turn 70. We have presented the Outstanding Achievement Award since 1954. This evening, Ann Miller Woodford of Andrews will become the 67th recipient. My fellow trustee, Catherine Frank, will tell us why our association selected Ms. Woodford for this year's award. But let me just say first that Ann ranks right up there at the top with some of Western North Carolina's most outstanding citizens who've been recognized over the years. For example, Fred Chappell, the former Port Laureate and author; Cratus Williams, the longtime Appalachian scholar and historian at ASU; Congressman Roy Taylor; Doug Orr, the former president of Warren Wilson College, a musician and a historian; and one of my favorites, the late Rudy Camblas, who led the campaign 50 years ago to save and preserve the Smith McDowell House. There have been a number of organizations who received the award too, including AB Tech, the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources, the Vitust Study Club, the Museum of the Cherokee Indian, in the North Carolina Department, well, I said the Department of Cultural Resources, the Archives Department at the Ramsey Library. Well, that's enough history for me. It is my pleasure to introduce Catherine Frank, the Executive Director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. Catherine left a similar position at a well-known university down in Durham, and we're so glad she did. Catherine is chair of our awards committee, and working with her this year are Jim Buchanan and Jeff Cantrell. Catherine, please tell us more about this wonderful person we honor tonight.
You're muted, Catherine.
Thank you. I will, and I thank you so much for the honor of serving on this committee. As I gathered with the members of our Outstanding Achievement Award Committee, Jeff Cantrell and Jim Buchanan, whose book Historic Tales of Sylva and Jackson I highly recommend, Jackson County I highly recommend, I was struck with the diversity, creativity, and talent of the people of our region who are working to understand our past. History's never seemed more relevant than in this very unusual year. In Western North Carolina, we've confronted the shortcomings of the ways that we learn and memorialize our history. We've acknowledged the ways our past informs our present in ways good and bad. We've seen efforts to preserve our built environment and to assess what our memorials say about our history and ourselves. We're learning the power of knowing and telling more than one story. We're finally hearing the stories of the incarcerated people who died building our railroads, and we're beginning to make more routine the practice of land acknowledgement to recognize and respect Indigenous people as the traditional stewards of the land. In this year, we saw many achievements in the collection of oral history and memoir writing, and we witnessed the ways that our libraries can collect and correct the historical record and present a more complete picture of our region. We've seen remarkable achievements in traditional accounts of our local history and culture, and we've seen people repurpose landmarks to preserve history and nurture creativity in music, art, community building, and food. In this outstanding year, Anne Miller Woodford's achievements are truly outstanding. She has shared her work in a number of exhibitions telling the history of African Americans in far western North Carolina and celebrating her own vision and inspiration in art. Her 2015 volume, When All God's Children Get Together, a celebration of the lives and music of African American people in far western North Carolina, has gained new audiences. Her powerful artwork teaches us all to see beauty in our landscapes and in the people whose stories she tells. Finally, her advocacy through the work of One Dozen Who Care challenges all of us to find common ground without ignoring the barriers that keep us apart. While Anne Miller Woodford is outstanding, she stands in good company with the past recipients of the Outstanding Achievement Award. She joins past recipients like Rob Neufeld, who's visiting our past columns in the Asheville Citizen-Times, and his website, The Read on Western North Carolina, reflected his pride in telling people's stories, making the connection to the past, and putting their lives in historical context, and his intention to focus on people's lives so that people know what it's like living another person's reality. Similarly, Anne shares the stories of people who are too often invisible and gives us a vivid, truthful, respectful, and loving insight into the reality of African American people in far western North Carolina. Jim Stokely was honored by the Western North Carolina Historical Association for a lifetime of work helping us to understand the Appalachian experience, and for his leader of the Wilma Dykeman Legacy, which sponsors talks, workshops, events, and other activities that sustain the values for which Wilma Dykeman stood: environmental integrity, social justice, and the power of the written and spoken word. Ann Miller Woodford adds complexity to our understanding of the Appalachian experience and has created her own legacy as a founder of One Dozen Who Care, a nonprofit that is the first and only rural, mostly African-American, woman-led community development organization in Western North Carolina. The group's mission is to strengthen leadership among local women and youth and to create strong community bonds through common cultural, economic, and social interactions, and to tear down walls and build bridges. Past recipients Dan Pierce, Patricia Beaver, and Gordon McKinney all earned the Outstanding Achievement Award in celebration of their academic work that helps us better understand Appalachia in historical and global contexts. Ann Miller Woodford tells personal stories in the context of historical events, including the restrictions of the Jim Crow South, the Civil Rights Movement, the double-edged sword of desegregation, and debates about affirmative action. Ann creates a library of human stories, which include vivid portraits, well-documented with beautiful photographs, and presents history that comes alive and encourages us to know more. She shows harsh reality and gives us hope that the differences that separate us can be bridged with shared understanding. Doug Orr, as Ralph mentioned, was honored for having led Warren Wilson College and the Swannanoa Gathering in ways which enhance both the academic and cultural welfare of Western North Carolina, and for his work Wayfaring Strangers, the musical voyage from Scotland and Ulster to Appalachia. With co-author Fiona Ritchie, Orr helped us to understand the evolution and history of the music of our mountains. Ann Miller Woodford helps us to understand the power of sacred and secular music to express the sorrow and resilience of African Americans in Appalachia. And she brings the history to life when she herself performs. She's also an artist, and in her work, both as a historian and a painter, she strives to see the invisible and make it visible. She writes, "Since no one can visualize what I have experienced, I prefer to paint what I like and what inspires me." Ann Miller Woodford tells stories that celebrate her heritage as she conveys the joy of memory, but she never shies away from asking us to confront the harsh reality of life in a racist environment. She tells stories of men and women who showed courage and persistence in the face of obstacles that ranged from insensitive and offensive language to harsh economic realities and grueling work to physical danger and violence. She demonstrates the importance of telling the stories of those who are sustained by faith and music. She says that if more African American people knew their history, they would be stronger and step out and do more things in the community. I'm hopeful that everyone reading and hearing these stories gains a deeper appreciation of the complexity of our history, and that all of us will be prompted to step up and do more things to create a more just community. I can think of no one more deserving of the Western North Carolina Historical Association's Outstanding Achievement Award than Ann Miller Woodford. Please watch this short video and savor Ann's talents as a storyteller, historian, singer, artist, and activist.
I've learned my African American history through my experiences, through my family and my teachers when I was very young, and I'm still learning. I hope that everyone can hear my words, but the photos will tell much of the story. And I want everybody to know I can't speak for all African Americans, but I have a lot of stories to tell. And everybody around us, I encourage folks to write down the stories that their elders tell them so that they can keep that, because when the people pass away, a whole library goes with them. My work that I do right now is to make the seemingly invisible African American people in far western North Carolina visible. I was born in Andrews and lived in Andrews until I graduated from elementary school. My dad's name, Purell Miller. He was born in Andrews, and my mother, Margaret Ann Weichel Miller, was from Franklin. Mama was a domestic worker, and she worked at a place called the Andrews Terrace Hotel and other places before we were born. The first two of us were born. And then she worked in private homes as we grew up. And she also did washing and ironing at home and in our home. Daddy was self-employed for most of my life, but spent a few years in construction jobs and at Magnavox Furniture Company. Daddy was a farmer, a well digger, a tree trimmer, a house painter, brick and block and rock layer. He did a little bit of everything. And people remember him for all the work that he did here in Andrews. One day back in the 1980s, I looked at my folks. I'll always love these people. And I felt a heart full of gratitude. Daddy worked. Mama sang like an angel. She could break into a song like, "There is a land, a fadeless day, free from all sorrow, pain or care. And they tell me that there's no night over there, just over the hill." People from all over knew my mother and knew her singing. And I come nowhere close to that lady's voice. She won a talent hunt one time in Andrews, but because of raising us children that she had in the household, she did not go away to make records, which they had tried to get her to do. She passed away in 1993. Daddy was alone, but Daddy had a lot of stories to tell, and a whole lot of other people in the Black community as well as the white community have stories that they need to tell. One dozen and I decided that we were going to record the stories for future generations of the Black community. Well, I grew up on this small farm with my younger sister, Mary Alice, who passed away in 1991, and Nina Karen, who lives in Charlotte. My paternal grandparents and great-grandparents were William Cleveland, they called him Cleve Miller, and Nora Alice Howell, who married in 1919. Her father was Christenberry Howell, and her mother was Sally Howell Howell. My mother's parents lived in Franklin, and it was Weimer Weichel and Irene Amanda Elizabeth Chavis Weichel. She had 7 names, but we never could learn all of her 7 names. In the summers, we spent a couple of weeks there every year, and until I entered high school, and I had to work every summer. Grandpa Weichel was 4 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds all of his adult life, while Big Granny, we called her, was at least 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed up to 450 pounds over her lifetime. In 1912, there was an ethnic or racial cleansing in Cumming, Georgia. My grandpa, Cleve, I call him Grandpa, and his mother had to leave. They all the Black people had to leave. They cleaned out all Black people. They burned their school, they burned their churches, burned some of their homes, and moved into the homes that were nice and just took over. Decided they didn't want any more Black people in Cumming, Georgia, in Forsyth County. And when Grandpa and his mother, Grandma Katie, they moved from Cumming, of course, up to Marietta, and then he had a job on the railroad, so he decided they would move down to Blue Ridge. You call it an opportunity, but when a white man told a Black man what to do, they had to do it in those days. So they sent Grandpa up into Cherokee County to make deliveries from items that had come in on the train. Grandpa said it was very scary to travel through places up into Tennessee and Georgia, coming up this way from Blue Ridge into Murphy and Andrews area. But he did it, and he was here. And if people understand, those who know history know that white people could not sell property, could not sell land by law to a Black person. But when he moved here, he saw how friendly the people were in Cherokee County, and he really said he gathered his nerve and asked a man, did he know anybody that wanted to sell property? And the man said, yes, I've got a piece. Told him to come right on up here to Andrews. So he traveled up to Andrews, found the property, and he built the first house in the area called Happy Top. Neighbors started to move in, and there were neighbors called the Hyatts. Temple and her husband, Mike Hyatt, moved in and built the next house down below my grandpa and grandma's house. Texana community is in Murphy, and for many years, until Western Carolina has African American students there, it had the largest population of African Americans in the far west. Down on the picture here, you'll see Isaac McClellan, whose daughter's name was Texas. He changed her name from Texas to Texana. And over on the right there is Texana's daughter and her grandchildren. We don't have a picture of Texana herself, but they named that community, as they call it, up on the hill, after her. Talking about the work world, cousin William Boynes, my grandpa's best buddy and cousin, owned the only Black-owned business in Andrews. It was located where the Methodist Church in Andrews is located right now, downtown. He called it the Pressing Club. He had told my dad that Percy B. Farabee, who was the mayor in Andrews for many years, owned one suit when he came to Andrews. And of course, when he died, he was a multimillionaire. But he said Mayor Farabee would come in and have him press and clean his suit while he waited in the back room. I thought that was such a neat story. This was a picture of the Cover family cannery, and it was later owned by Solomon. This is where most of the white and Black men in the community worked. Of course, the Black men received the worst and dirtiest work, and that was to bring the hides in and take all that skin and fat and everything off the hides and put them in the vats. When I was a little kid, people didn't pay as much attention to safety as they do nowadays. We would run up and down between the vats that had acid in it. So my dad even once had burns on his arms and hands because of the acid that he had to lift those hides out of the acid that removed the hair and the fat and all from the back of those hides. The Black men worked in one section and the white men worked in another, except for the ones that were called supervisors. There was the Great Migration north. A lot of people left the year that I went to school. The following year after that, people just left in droves because the tannery in town closed, so they moved north. The schools were not equal. That Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision took place in 1896. And of course, Black people had to be in little shacks for schools, cold places, all kinds of rough places. So there was nothing equal about it. The Supreme Court decision in the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1954 overturned that Plessy versus Ferguson. And that led to the ending of segregation. Well, we say ending, but it took a long time before it really ended. The building you see here is the Andrews Colored Negro Elementary School. It was built in 1905 and it closed in 1965 when the white school was integrated in Andrews. There's a picture of Miss Elsie Osborne from Haywood County, who taught first to the 8th grade at the Andrews Colored Elementary School for 16 years. All the older people used to tell me about her. She was somebody really, really special. Here around 1961 is the whole student body that was left when integration took place. And that's the teacher, Miss Ida Mae Logan. She was my favorite teacher. She submitted my artworks to county fairs and the Scholastic Art Awards and paid for that herself. She was the last teacher in that school. Unfortunately, Black teachers, most all of them, even though they were well educated, lost their jobs upon integration. The students could go to the white schools, we call them, but the teachers were not accepted. Education, it was always important to the community when I grew up. Our teachers went to summer school to be sure that they were up to date on all the latest education trends and Black history. All three of us went to Allen High School in Asheville. People from Murphy, all over, all the Black girls from Western North Carolina out this way, many attended Allen High School. the teacher here on the left is Margaret Streeter Miller. She taught in Andrews for her first teaching job. She had to move. The teachers would move all the way from as far away as 100 miles and sometimes a little further to come to Andrews or other schools in these rural areas around the mountains. She taught in Andrews and she stayed at my grandparents' house and met my daddy's youngest brother, Uncle Ray, and they got married later. When the schools integrated, we had some great sportsmen, and they helped integration because the people in the white schools, they wanted to win games, football games, and track and field and basketball. And so these young people that you see here went into the Andrews School and made such a great difference. Jackson County sports figures all helped to bring down those barriers in the public school system because they were such outstanding athletes. I truly believe that if more African American people knew their history, they would be stronger and they'd step out and do more things in the community. All of our history was taken away from us when schools were integrated. Even now, you don't find as many African American stories and history in the history books. We're very proud of our churches, and you can look at them and see the quality of the churches and how well they're kept. Place where African Americans could go and meet when there was no place else to go. Sometimes the African Americans would meet in the school buildings, such as in Andrews when they tore down the original Mount Zion Baptist Church of Andrews. We had church in the school building for quite a while. Some of these churches are beautiful. The thing that is a great thing to say about Western North Carolina is the way that the white people have worked with the Black people. Black people wanted their own churches. And so many of the white people actually helped them with funding and supported them with administrative services. Some of these churches were moved, were white churches that folks closed, and they gave the church building or sold it to the Black community, and they moved these buildings to the sites where they're located now. These congregations took place very close to freedom in 1864-65. Some of these churches formed without a building, but they were formed as organizations. So we're very proud of the folks who kept these going. The Black people worked hard out in the community and still brought their money to these churches to make sure that they grew. There's a scripture, Jeremiah 20, the 9th verse, that talks about what you have inside you is shut up in your bones, just about to burst out like fire. And so I call the chapter in the book Women of Fire, because these women have made a difference by preaching in the regions. Some of them are pastors of churches, and some are ministers in their churches. My dad said at one time Mount Zion of Andrews had closed down because there was nobody to preach, and it had to be a man. But Minister Sutter came up from Murphy and kept the church going. Daddy said he was the only male going at that time, but she kept the church going until they could hire a male pastor. One of the greatest things that we've had that held us, I call it the glue that has held us together, is our African American churches and the songs that we've sung together. Negro spirituals, as they call it, are extra special. The white owners of people that were enslaved were really intrigued by the harmonies and the rhythms of the Negro spirituals. So they let the enslaved people gather for religious services, and sometimes they listened to them and watched them, but mostly for entertainment. Some of them believed that it was impossible for their slaves to have a soul. So they did not look on it as being faith-based, but it was. Enslaved people were forced to live in two different worlds just to stay alive and to do all that they could to keep their families together. And there is a song that breaks my heart every time I sing it or every time I hear it sung. It's called Lord, How Come Me Here? 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 I wish I never was born. They treat me so mean, Lord. They treat me so mean, Lord. They treat me so mean, Lord. I wish I never was born. They sold my children away, Lord. They sold my children away, Lord. They sold my children away, Lord. I wish I never was born. That song is one that has a sad feeling that there is no hope in it. But a lot of the others, people turn to the Lord for help, and they wanted the Lord to help them. So a song that I won't sing the whole thing, but one that says, pass me not, O gentle Savior, hear my humble cry, while on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Spirituals would tell stories that just reached down into the soul, and they had melodies and rhythms and harmonies and repetitions that came from the motherland, Africa. Spirituals speak of hope most of the time in the presence of really, really deep and heavy duty suffering. So if we know our history, we're stronger. We're able to stand up like those people in the churches that knew that they were somebody special when they would dress up on a Sunday after working in dirt and filth all week. They could dress up on Sunday and go to church and stand up and feel honored and respected. That is what history does for you. Teaches you to love yourself and your people. How many communities all around have Black people who have done great wonders to build a community, who are totally ignored, have been left out of everything. I saw that there were African American women, especially, who were doing all they could to work in the community to help the people. One-on-one, they were doing this work. So I talked to Brenda Blunt and Jean Bennett. I talked to them because they both worked out in the community and had a lot of connections. And I asked them, would they find out if the Black women in the community would like to get together and work as a group. And they did. 22 Black women came together one evening. We worked out a long list of things we would like to see done to help our people and to work together with the white community. I came to the group and I said, if everybody would bring $100 to the table, we'd have some money to start our projects with. In the next meeting, we had 11 women laid a check down, and one lady who had kids in school and worked at McDonald's in the morning, and in the afternoon she would go and work as a domestic worker, laid $100 bill on the table. That is when we became One Dozen Who Care. So the One Dozen has continuously tried to do all that we could to help the community. My goal is always to build bridges and to tear down walls that divide. And that's what One Dozen Who Care has worked under for all these years, from 1998. This painting that you see here is a part of my new series called Black in Black on Black. And that the initial painting for that is called He. And it's on a billboard down in Murphy right now. And it's the words are see me, see me. I want people to stop thinking, oh, I don't see color. If you say I don't see color, there's a problem with that because you don't see me, I'm invisible. And so that hopefully people will look at that billboard and understand why it's there. See me, look at me, talk to me, ask me questions. Let's have these conversations that are going to help tear down these walls that are dividing us now. We can all do something. Write a letter, talk to your congressman, do whatever it takes to tear down these walls and to build these bridges.
That video was adapted from a presentation that Anne gave for us as part of our Lit Cafe program a few months ago. We wish we could have showed you the whole thing, but it would have taken up this whole ceremony. But I'll turn it back to Ralph now.
And I wish we could do this in person, but this is the presentation bowl. Your name joined 66 other names on it today.
Oh,
And going back to 1954. I wish we could give it to you, but it stays in the Smith McDowell house all the time. You're welcome to come see it anytime and bring your friends. We are going to send you a framed award, and with it will be a check for $1,000. We have, this is the first year there's been a monetary award with the Outstanding Achievement Award. And you're such a worthy recipient, and it's a great time to start including that monetary award. Thank you for all you've done to record and paint and tell the history of African Americans in far Western North Carolina. And thank you for all you've done to help other people understand that history, or at least hear it and try to understand it. And thank you for all of your efforts to erase racism and to build bridges of understanding. It's an honor to be in your presence. I could have watched another hour of you talking, but the time is up. And I think now if you have some remarks to make in person, that would be great.
wow. I hadn't heard myself speaking like that. Thank you so much. No one is an island. No one stands alone. Each one's joy is joy to me. Each one's grief is my own. We need one another, so I will defend each one as my brother and sister, each one as my friend. Oh, I'm just overwhelmed. What a wonderful, wonderful gift you've given to me. When you called me, Ralph, with that enthusiasm and that inspiration, I couldn't believe it. I never would have dreamed in all my visioning for the future. I never would have dreamed of myself being among people like the ones that you've already talked about today. When I looked at your website, I love your justice statement. And you said your board of trustees stands against inequity, injustice, and racism, acknowledges and supports the positive role that recent protests have played in opening the door to real and necessary change, that you recognize that there is an ongoing need to better represent the diversity of voices in our region, and that you commit to listening and learning. Oh, thank you all for that. That is a fantastic statement to go by. Words like these can and must transform our communities, and is holding uncomfortable conversations that will have to take place continuously. So we will move on from here. Thank you, Board of Trustees of WNCHA, the Awards Committee and Chair, Catherine Frank, Executive Director, Ann Chesky-Smith, and Trevor Freeman for this wonderful, fantastic honor I just beg you all right now to put up with me as I say some appreciative words to a lot of people. I know that I'm going to miss some, and I know that there won't be enough time. It would take the whole program plus more to name everybody that has made a difference in my life, that has pulled me along. God knows who they are, and I know all of you will be blessed. I thank God for love, life, and the gift of creativity that's been showered on me. I was a shy child. My younger sister, the late poet Mary Alice Miller Worthy, was my protector. I can see my little sister, Nina Miller Moses, standing by my side, quietly admiring my elementary works of art when she was only 4 or 5 years old. I can hear my grandpa, Cleve Miller, the one that was sent out of Cumming, Georgia, at the families at gunpoint. He said, Ann can do anything. I'm so happy to know that Mom and Daddy, Pearl and Margaret Miller, believed in me as an artist. I thank my late teacher, Miss Ida Mae Logan, that you saw a picture of there, at the Andrews Colored Negro Elementary School, for sacrificing her meager funds to make it possible for me to win gold keys and blue ribbons at an early age, and a school nurse who encouraged me with a gift of a set of used oils and oil paints and brushes. If it was not for my education at Allen High School in Asheville that was sponsored by the Methodist women, I wouldn't be here today. The principal, Julia Titus, and a teacher, Josephine Litchfield, provided my first formal art training by Pearl Sheldrick, who lived in Asheville. The strict English teacher, Betty Sue Smith, is largely responsible for my ability to write the history of my people. With deep gratitude, I appreciate all who have joined us this evening to support the work that all of us are doing together right here. I thank you all. So many people deserve this award. As Ralph said, it takes a village. But I appreciate that it's been gifted to me, and I will use the privilege of this gift to keep doing the work to make the invisible people, or the seemingly invisible people, visible in our region. The African American people have been largely overlooked, overworked, and generally ignored. We're going to change that, aren't we? I'm grateful to the women of One Dozen Who Care that we talked about already in the film. Through them, I was able to we as a group were able to receive a grant from the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area Partnership. And I did the research, and I worked with Barbara McCrae, who recently passed away, who laid out the book for me. She designed it, and I will always be grateful to her. Much obliged, as they used to say in the country, to John Butler and Gary Kirksey from Ohio University and the team they brought down to work with us in 1998 with One Dozen Who Care to put together a program called When All God's Children Get Together. They recorded and they digitized footage that needs to become a film. That film documents some of the really rich history of our churches in this region. I want to thank Pam Meister and her team at the Mountain Heritage Center at Western Carolina University. She provided that All God's Children exhibit that is showing there now at the Smith McDowell House. And my wonderful, caring, faithful coach that I've never met in person, Monica Davis of Exceptional People magazine. She's teaching me to use best practices for my new entrepreneurial life. Catherine Jenkins of Tri-County Community College has been super to support me. Dr. Emery Prescott, who has effectively led me to a renaissance in my life at this older age. Rhonda Bertha, my webmaster, storyteller Gary Carden of Silva, the writer Dave Waldrop, who purchased my book before it was even published. Pamela and Ken Carmen, Bob Ferreira, Harold Woodford, Virginia Turnbull, the interdisciplinary research leaders, and the late Judy Brooks, and all of those who shared their pictures with me, all those photographs with me. They are people names that are right here in my community that I grew up with and went to school with: Shirley Burgess Allen, Mildred Jones, Betty Lewis Nicely, Macy and Sheila Robinson, and a gentleman whose family had a slave that lived through 3 generations, David Dale Dickey, from down in Knoxville, Tennessee, the Cherokee County and Macon County historical organizations, and the late Jackson County teacher, Margaret Streeter Miller, that you showed in these slides. I give homage to Victoria Casey McDonald, who wrote the first recognized history of our people in her 2006 book, The African Americans in Jackson County, a pictorial history from slavery to integration. Most of all, I have to thank my dad, Purell Miller. He inspired me to write this book based on his incredible memories and storytelling abilities. Fantastic. People know him from all over about his stories. Young people used to come and sit at his feet and ask questions. White kids would come and ask him about their family stories. Daddy was an amazing man. He shared his love, his personality, and one of his caretakers, as he grew older, made a Facebook page for him. And if you go to Purell Miller on the Facebook, you'll see all the people that respond every time I put his picture up there. He's been gone since 2013, but people are still responding. Up to 200 people at one time will respond how they knew him and what he did for them. My dad built the fires in our little 1-room, 1-teacher school. And back in the day, we had 4 to 6 inches of snow on the ground in the wintertime. Daddy walked to work, so he would walk by the school and build the fire so it would be warm for us when we got into school. And he left those footprints. When we got ready to go to school, all we had to do was step into his footprints, and we didn't get snow down in our brown high top shoes. It's a wonderful thing to know that I am proud at this time in my life to still walk in his footsteps. Black writers like Langston Hughes and Lorraine Hansberry ask us, what happens to a dream deferred? I know that it can dry up and die like a raisin in the sun. We can all see around us today that it can explode into heart-rending negative actions as well. But working together, we all refuse to allow our people to be ignored and forgotten. We are going to bring down these walls. I appreciate your having provided a place to remember the almost invisible African-American people in far western North Carolina. You made a step toward tearing down these walls that divide us as a people. You're moving toward building bridges across the lines of race, religion, national origin, gender, and so many other chasms we have in our country today. I pray that we'll never allow the dreams of our young people to dry up and die like a raisin in the sun. However, there is an old African proverb that says, put some feet on those prayers. I hope that many other people will be vicariously lifted today and encouraged to talk with their own elders and write the stories that they tell so they can use it for future generations. We're each diminished if we forget who we are. Remember, another old African proverb says, when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. Western North Carolina Historical Association, I thank you, all of you, for this wonderful honor.
Thank you so much, Anne. I want to say thank you both to Catherine and Ralph for being here and sharing the hosting duties tonight. But overall, most of all, I just want to say thanks one more time to Anne Miller Woodford for all your work. And I wish we could see everyone in the audience because I know we're all giving you a huge round of applause.
Thank you.
And I can't say thank you enough. This is sort of a professional historian's dream, is to have people collect and record their community history, and to go above and beyond the way that you have it's invaluable. So And we're getting lots of bravos on our Q&A and raised hands. You can't hear them, but they're there. Bravo, Anne, you are a shining light. Lots of lovely things, lots of hands raised. So once again, Anne, thank you. Thank you to everyone who could attend tonight. If you got here late, we did record the event. And we will have it processed and up on our website in the next few days. If you have trouble accessing it or you have any further comments or questions, please feel free to email me at director@WNCHistory.org or visit our website, which is where the webinar will be posted in a few days, which is WNCHistory.org. If you are Ann Woodford is amazing. Thank you. Marvelous. Lots of chats coming in. Amazing work, Ann. Inspiring. Keep changing lives with your story. Ann Woodford is amazing. Thank you. Bravo. We are having our annual meeting for WNCHA tomorrow night via Zoom. Now that you all have figured out how our Zoom platform works, please feel free to join us at 5 o'clock and find out more about what we've done in the past year and what we are hoping to do in the future. So once again, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And I'm going to end the meeting here. Oh, just a second. Amazing. We love you. We're very blessed to know you from the Jordan family. So I'll
everybody.
with just one more thank you and a round of applause for Anne. So thank you, Anne, and I will end the meeting now. But thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who was here. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Anne. You were amazing. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.